Welcome to María Alejandra OFF-TOPIC, the podcast about the non-musical things around music. My name is María Alejandra Jiménez, and I'm a violinist, musician, and writer. Besides this podcast, in Off-Topic we also have a blog and a newsletter. Subscribe on your favorite audio platform so you'd never miss an episode. And if you want to explore more, visit mariaalejandra.jimenez.com. Jimenez with J and with Z. Our guest today is Chris Lloyd, and to introduce him, I will share his bio exactly as it appears on his website, which I think sets already the tone for today's episode. So here we go. Depending on how you rate music, Chris Lloyd is not one of the finest pianists of his generation. He's probably not even among the top 10 finest young musicians of his time, but he does have a few things that should make you stop and listen more closely. Independence, individuality, irreverence. Want to feel something at a concert? Want to witness a performance by someone who actually feels something? Quite apart from being solely concerned with what is correct, Chris is devoted purely to transmitting story, emotion, and expression in his performance. The next generation of musicians will reclaim classical music as something they own, something they want to share with you, rather than treating it as part of an antiquated museum of the past. Fully educated and fully confident in their ability to communicate with an audience. Chris Lloyd, far from being the finest pianist of his generation, is striving to pave the way for the next. And how do I know him? I first came across one of his articles on Medium, where he writes about the challenges in the classical music industry. I kept reading and found myself relating deeply to his perspective. Curious to meet another musician who also writes, I reached out to him and he kindly agreed to have a virtual coffee chat. Since then, I've been following his musical and writing journey with curiosity. And today's topic is sport and what we can learn from it in the music industry. And I don't know much about sports, I have to say, so I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say. So welcome, Chris. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm fantastic. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me. I got to say, my name pronounced in a South American accent is much better than pronounced in an Australian accent, so that's fantastic. And yeah, I got to thanks for reading out the biography. I had to have to admit that I wrote that after writing an article criticizing biographies and how they all sound the same, but I have to mention that I don't think I've got a single gig offered to me from anyone ever again after saying that I'm not one of the finest musicians in my generation. So, don't know whether I can recommend that to anyone.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say I also changed my bio quite a lot. Also kind of reflecting on how we write the bios as classical musicians. And in the first line, I'm talking about Shakira, which I don't think is a great idea to book gigs as a classical musician. But I have to say that Shakira was one of my biggest influences when I was 5 years old. So
as she should be, absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, and there is something that you would like to add about yourself before we begin?
Oh, not much. I've just admitted that no one's offered me a gig in 5 years, so that's pretty good. But I suppose I get around because I also founded a group called the 1781 Collective around the same time, and part of our remit is setting up our own productions and so on. So I suppose it's all right that no one has asked me to play for them recently, as there seems to be too much work organising our own shows at the moment.
That's really cool. Great. And the first thing I ask all the guests in this season is, do you have any recommendations to share? It can be a movie, a TV show, a book, a place to eat. It can be really whatever that you have been enjoying lately.
It's a tricky one because I'm living in Berlin, Germany. And places to eat here, not very good. So it can't be that. TV show, well, we're living in the age where we watch way too much Netflix. And so we watch so many things, but nothing actually goes in. So I can't remember anything I've watched recently. I'm not doing enough book reading at the moment because I watch too much Netflix apparently. But I will say I saw the new Bridget Jones on Sunday and it's fantastic. It lives up to the earlier Bridget Jones films. So everyone who hasn't watched it yet, get into that.
I should watch actually both Bridget Jones because I didn't watch the original still, so...
There's 4. The original was fantastic.
Yeah.
The second one is pretty good. The third one, I never bothered with, and people say, eh. But the fourth one, it's amazing because, the first one is so ridiculous and silly and sort of kitschy. And then the fourth one retains those elements, but also features the main characters being 30 years older. And it sort of addresses adult topics in a really nuanced way. So, yeah, it's a beautiful film, actually. I liked it.
Very cool. I will write it down to watch it so then I can talk about it maybe in a future newsletter. Who knows? And I wanted to ask you, why did you choose this topic?
The sports and music topic?
Yes.
It's an interesting one because growing up in Australia, we don't have a lot of love for culture as a general rule, but we do have a lot of love for sport. And so I grew up in the outback of South Australia, which is, funnily enough, the small town I came from is about 1,200 people. Yet at least 3 people born there, maybe 4 or 5, are working in the music industry. One's a very successful country rock guitarist living in Nashville. Another one represented Australia in the last Eurovision contest. Get your head around that. And then a couple of others are music therapists and music teachers. So I think, strangely enough, we had one fantastic music teacher, a piano teacher in my hometown. I think she was sort of responsible for a lot of us getting a start. But aside from that, it was a very sport-heavy town where sport's the heart of the community, mostly playing cricket, tennis, and Australian football. And so I grew up with sport, and I still absolutely love sport. Just before we started recording, I was watching a game of Australian football because it's round 1 there. It's a thing that I've always loved, and I've over the years found fascinating the connection, or not the connection per se, but the similarities between professional sportsmanship and professional musicianship. And I think they actually have a lot of crossover and things that we can learn in the music field from sports, from the sporting industry.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Actually, I don't know much about sport, and I was never that much into sport, but something really interesting, my best friend during high school, she was really, really passionate about sports in general, to the point that sometimes to watch certain games and matches, she was like waking up at 2 a.m. because of the time changes from Venezuela and other parts of the world. And I found always very interesting the way she consumes sport was very similar to the way I was consuming music back then. It was not only about the matches, like she was watching like everything, like tennis, basket, football. She just loved sports in general, and I found very interesting the way she related to the sport people and to the teams, basically that's probably my closest connection to sport. So I'm very curious to hear what you have to say. And I wanted to ask you, what is your first memory associated with the world of sports and entertainment?
Yeah, so my first memories of sports and entertainment would be probably from a very personal perspective, in that I was never going to games as a kid or anything, living in the outback. So I have these sort of vague memories of watching the first games of football and so on, and cricket, on television. And yeah, interestingly, I think my mother wasn't that much into sports. Neither was my father. He would pay attention to the scores, but not necessarily actually watch them religiously. And so watching sport was a personal decision when I was a kid, and I think it was probably a subconscious way to assimilate into the community I was in the sense that I was a half Asian nerdy kid who played piano, living in a town full of farmers and shearers. So sport being the main thing that all the other kids were interested in, I imagine that was one of the motivations to get into it at the beginning. But yeah, playing sport as a kid, I was never much good because I was a bit of a soft kid in the sense that I remember my first football training, the Australian football, which is horribly violent. It's fantastic. When I was 5, I didn't like that first training because all the other boys were too rough. I think all the other girls were too rough for me as well, actually. And then playing cricket, I didn't like because the idea of someone trying to hit you in the head with a large wooden ball didn't quite wasn't my cup of tea. But so I played tennis quite a bit. And then I at some point, I think I was must have been 11 or 12, I toughened up. And I went back to footy training, and I think the first game I put some other kid in hospital, so I got a little bit tougher at some point at least.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. This kind of unblocked a memory because I actually did karate as a kid when I was like 10, 11, 12-year-old, and I have to say that I really, really loved it. So yeah, I didn't remember that much actually. So yeah, I had a bit of a relationship with sports somehow.
It's just fun hitting things.
Yeah, it was amazing because what I liked about karate a lot is that it was somehow very meditative, because it was a lot about reacting to the environment rather than actually doing things. And I found it very beautiful in a way. I had to stop actually because I was doing also orchestra, and at some point everything started to overlap way too much, so I had to choose between continuing with the orchestra with karate, and I decided to continue with the orchestra at the time. But yeah, I was also kind of a soft person in a way, and when we were playing sports in school, I was very scared of being hit by balls and stuff, and I was just being very bad at sports because of that, because instead of taking the ball, I was just running away from the ball and stuff like this when playing. We were playing kicking ball, that I don't know if it's a thing in English. I don't know.
No idea. I mean, we just used to throw things at people all the time, so if it was a sport or not, we were just throwing things at people in Australia. We used to play these games at high school, I remember. Kick to kick was, I suppose, the unofficial term. But they were basically one group of... It was an all-boys Irish Catholic boarding school in Adelaide. And yes, it is as bad as it sounds. And so you'd have about 40 boys on one side kicking the ball to 40 boys on the other side. And that was a sort of excuse to just hit each other as hard as possible whenever the ball was coming up in the pursuit of it. It's really quite animalistic in a sense, I suppose. This pursuit of a leather-covered bit of air. But yeah, no. I think, yes, orchestra ruined my professional sports career as well at some point. Luckily, I wasn't very good at sports, so it was an easy decision.
Yeah. I mean, this is the thing also with karate. Like, in the first time I did a combat, I was really ready to just kick the person. And I was hit very badly, and it was terrible. And I kind of realized straight that it was not about that. It was not about like attacking the other person. It was more about okay, I have to really react to what the other person is going to do. And the second time was much better because of that. So I guess I like this kind of quietness of this in a way. Like you have to be very quiet in your mind. Yeah. So how does your experience with sport, like when you talk about like experience with sports, it's mostly like about watching it, right?
Yeah,
like watching sports. Yeah.
I did. It's an interesting one. I was speaking just last night with a friend actually about this. When I was studying in London, I was at the Royal Academy of Music, which is it's tells itself that it's one of the best schools of music in the world. But the main sort of thing, I was surrounded by 100 other piano players, all operating at an obscenely high level. And so the day-to-day, the 8 to 10 hours a day in that building was spent having to operate similarly at a really high level. And so I used to play Australian football in London because there's a lot of Australians there and we're all pretty mad about sport. And it was fantastic because it was that one place a week where I could be really bad at something. And I remember I'd go on the field. I I'd be starting in defense, and within about 3 minutes, my opposition would have kicked 3 or 4 goals on me. So I'd just take myself off and sit on the bench. And a couple of times, the coach looks over to his side and he sees me sitting down. He's like, "What are you doing here?" I was like, "Oh, I'm done. Take me off, coach. He's killing me." And so in a really healthy way, like playing sport was my access to a hobby, for want of a better term, I suppose. It was just a place where I could be bad at something, considering everything else had to be at such a high level. And in an unhealthy way, I kept breaking bones, ribs and fingers and collarbones. So I had to quit that pretty quickly. So now, unfortunately, I engage with it purely on a viewing level. And yeah, I find it, for me, again, the topic I was speaking about last night with this friend was about having hobbies. And I think for me, actually, sport is the most, it is my hobby to watch, where sort of for 3 or 4 hours a week, I become a filthy, masculine dude from the outback again. And that sort of allows me to connect to that side of my personality, which isn't the fancy piano playing European fella. So yeah, in that respect, I think that it's an outlet for me. And then also something that I try to learn from quite a lot. I'm sure we'll get into that a bit later.
Yes. This is very important, I think, because in the classical music world, especially when you are studying, there is this feeling that, at least, that you are not really allowed to be bad at things. And that I don't know how to explain, but there is always this pressure to try to be as perfect as we can, which is in a way very unhealthy, because I think that blocks a lot creativity in our field, unfortunately. And
that's a good point.
Yeah,
I mean, ironically, I think the sports players are similarly under the same pressure to be perfect, but then they don't have the same response or the same necessity of being creative, perhaps. I don't know. That's an interesting point.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because, yeah, I mean, eventually, I feel like in classical music, we are kind of far away, really, from music making. It's more kind of sporting, especially when you watch big competitions, international competitions. It's more kind of a sport performance rather than a musical performance or a creative expression, no? In a way.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. It absolutely is. I forget which book I read it in, but they were talking about how competitions essentially become the Olympics of music making. So it's all about who can play the fastest and the strongest and the hardest, which of course is not necessarily what you want to hear musically. And the interesting thing with sport, I find, is the unscripted narrative and the emotion that comes through as a result is something that's really phenomenal. And I think it's almost paradoxical in the sense that feeling of emotional release and build-up is something that you'd originally identify with music and culture. However, that's been completely pivoted into the sports arena these days, because even and my team, unfortunately, in Australia is pretty awful. So even when we are terrible, I will watch every game with the hope that we could still win. And you go on this roller coaster of emotions in every game, in every contest. And then when you win a close game, like the feeling of elation is shocking. Like I you know what? I don't feel that. I've never felt that in a concert compared to when Freo beat the Bulldogs in the 2022 elimination final. Like this sort of raw emotion and connection, because it's unscripted and because it's unpredictable, I think is really something powerful and really palatable. Whereas opposed to in a concert hall, 99% of the time, you know exactly what's coming at you, which is no risk and quite safe playing. And as a result, I mean, I feel like if we can't go to a Mahler symphony performance and have that same feeling of ecstatic elation at the end of it, I don't know what we're doing. I don't know how we got here, but I feel like that really can't be the intentions of the composers or the intention of the musicians either. But we've somehow found ourselves in this extremely scripted situation where you have a sense of safety coming into the concert hall, knowing exactly what's going to happen when you leave the concert hall. And I think maybe that's good on some levels, and maybe that's good for some audiences. But personally, I'd like to explore how we can go further into that sporting world.
That's a really fascinating point. Like, I never thought of it like that because, yeah, I mean, it's true. Like in sports, I don't know. My boyfriend, he's really into. I don't even know what's the proper word in English for this because it can be like soccer, football. I don't know.
It depends which part. If you're in Britain,
it
you
depends
call it football.
on which.
If you're in America or Australia, we call it soccer.
Yeah, but I'm talking about soccer, so soccer / football. And he's a lot into an Italian team, Inter. And sometimes I watch a bit of the games with him. I get very bored with soccer in general, but I watch a bit of the games with him. And it's fascinating to connect with this feeling of expecting a team to win and then seeing this kind of unpredictability makes it a very engaging experience. And this makes me think about lately I've been listening a lot to the band The Doors.
Oh, great.
And listening a lot to watching a lot of videos of Jim Morrison performing, and something that I find incredible in his performance is this unpredictability. Like sometimes he will start screaming like randomly out of nowhere, and there is in particular this song, The End, in which he says something really terrible that I'm not going to say here because otherwise I don't know what's going to happen. But in the studio recording, he cuts this part. Like, he doesn't actually say this thing. Instead of saying it, he starts screaming. And actually live, sometimes he said it and sometimes he doesn't. And it creates this kind of tension building all the time. You don't know if he's going to say this or not. Maybe since this is going to go to YouTube, maybe I don't say it here, but maybe I will write it in the show notes. It's going to be written in my
we'll put a link
blog
to it
somewhere. But yes, and I sometimes this is missing quite a lot in classical music. I agree that for some people maybe it's nice that it's an scripted experience and that you know what to expect, but maybe actually I never thought of implementing these kind of things on my own performance, so I will think about that. Thank you for the inputs.
I don't think it's also limited to classical music actually either. I've been to enough rock shows where I've been rather bored, even though the music was great and it was loud and the lighting was good. The sort of, again, the predictability of what's going to happen was the main thing. And I find the same in jazz quite a lot of the time. I always refer to this this passage in Kerouac's On the Road where he describes a jazz concert that he's at, and it's so evocative and it sounds so raw and primal, what the musicians are doing. And I think, gosh, I've never seen a jazz concert like that. The only jazz concerts I've seen these days tend to be a lot of trad players playing very safely and sort of really skirting around the rules without ever threatening to break them. So I think it's a thing that we have in all music genres, especially maybe genres specifically that have become so codified and have developed their own sets of rituals that we all follow. And in a rock concert in a sort of large venue is 100% as ritualistic as a classical music concert, in that the starting band plays, the backup act, they play, not many people care, some people are into it, but really not that much, and then the stage lights go up again, the band goes off, the roadies come in, bring the staff, the stage, the background music comes up, builds the expectation, then no, goes back down, then it comes up, and then audience are like, is the band coming out? No. Happens a third time, and so on. Then the musicians come out, big thing. It's as scripted as the classical music concert, and I feel like those are some of the most boring concerts I've been to as well. And I think it's this type of thing, I think, is the with the risk, the lack of risk also comes with the benefit of knowing you're not going to lose. And I think that's one of the key elements in sport as well. There's a 50% chance, unless you go for my team, which means there's a 90% chance you're going to lose, and there's a real risk that you're going to lose and feel terrible after that. And that's one of the That's the benefit you get when you win. And I think, do we have the opportunity to go on stage and risk losing, in a sense, risk playing terribly, and therefore our audience is also let down from that? And will they ever accept that? I think that's a tricky one. So we'd have to find ways to sort of integrate elements of risk without potentially losing everything. But then at the same time, maybe that means we just don't, we can never access the same potential for success as well.
Yeah, it's funny because I always thought that I was kind of a free performer in a way. Like I connect with a kind of flow state, and I'm kind of in this flow state, and I felt that I was kind of free and kind of taking risk, and I take quite a lot of risks on stage, and sometimes that goes really bad. But then I started taking singing lessons with a vocal coach. I never sang before. And I realized that actually there is so much more space for risk than what I ever experienced. And my coach, she's always pushing me to take risks. And it's been a fantastic practice to just try to take as many risks as I can in a kind of controlled environment. And it's showing me that actually there is so much more that I could develop and expand on my own playing and performance that I never thought of. So that's really interesting. And I think like as trained classical musicians, there is still so much more space to risk, even controlled risk in certain cases, that we cannot even think of it. I don't know, we cannot even like dimension it. So, yeah, very interesting. So, is there a particular figure in sports that has influenced you as a person, as a musician, or that inspires you?
I was thinking about this, and the one person that comes to mind was the old coach of my team in Australia. And he's a particularly gruff, no-nonsense type of person. And so in his press conferences after games, they were often one of the most entertaining elements to watch, especially if he'd lost and he was in a bad mood. But he just had these great old Australian one-liners that were strangely motivating. And the one that always sticks with me is, it's never as good and it's never as bad as it seems, which refers to either if we'd had a great win, he'd say, it's never as good, it's never as bad as it seems. If we had a massive loss, same thing. And I quite like that as a leveling sort of concept. Another one was he'd always talk about fingernail deep analysis. I just love that that image. So, yeah, Ross Lyon, the old coach, he's now coaching the Saints and they're not doing very well. So apparently he's run out of ideas. But he's the one, that sort of very, very pragmatic figure. He's the one that has inspired me, I think, more than anyone else.
Very cool. Thanks for sharing. I like this idea that nothing is as good or as bad as it seems. Especially, nothing is as good as it seems. That's a very interesting one. Yeah. And let's talk a bit about, now we are touching a bit the subject that you explore a lot in your writing about audience engagement, the music industry, organizing classical music or music events in general. What do you think we could learn from sports and sports teams in this aspect?
Yeah, I think this is one of the biggest elements we can actually take away from it. I think my hypothesis, without doing any research to this point or actually delving into the topic very much, just sort of looking at dates and putting things together, is that you look at the peak of classical music popularity within Europe sort of happens around the same time that professionalised sporting codes were being developed in Britain. And what happens over the course of the next 150 years or so, 130 years, is classical music's relevance and popularity to everyday life changes. Of course, for so many different reasons. But I think all these changes were happening in classical music and in culture. And at the same time, a different option was being developed, especially for people that weren't in highly educated classes. And what we have as a result is in the void of accessible music being made, people were getting into soccer for the first time, people were getting into rugby, or people were getting into cricket and tennis. And it's a fascinating thing to think that actually 100 years ago there was really no sort of market for sports watching, sports viewership, as there is today. And there's a lot of movement, I believe, in the 70s, 80s, 90s to really professionalize sports. And again, that's only 50 to 60 years ago that it became a high money industry. Before that, everyone was an amateur running around on the weekend and going to their jobs during the week. And since then, the sporting industry has developed a way to monetize and grab the attention of everyone in every country, basically. I imagine there's quite a few countries where sport doesn't play as big a role, but I mean, even in Germany, you've got the obsession with soccer, with basketball recently. So it is a no barrier sort of entertainment option that people can engage with, as opposed to classical music, which has so many barriers just based on the difficulty of it. Like if you want to play it, you have to learn it for a long time. Whereas anyone can get a basketball and shoot hoops with their friends at any level and still get a level of enjoyment from it. And so I think we should be looking at figures who have who played a big role in evolving sport from an amateur industry that was really about playing with your friends on the weekend and turned it into a really professional money-making machine. And not necessarily for the sake of money-making, but that wouldn't hurt. And I'm thinking specifically about Kerry Packer was a figure in Australia, I think in the 70s. He ran a media company, and he founded, I think it was called World Series Cricket, which was the first sort of money-grabbing attempt to make a televised version of cricket and sell that to a lot of people. And you think, well, cricket is an excessively boring sport to watch. If you think about it, like nothing happens over 5 days. You've got people, both teams wear the same colour, and it involves a lot of just standing around looking at the grass grow. Yet the coverage of cricket is fantastic. I'll watch it. I love cricket. And you'll watch it for 5 days, for 8 hours if you've got nothing else to do. And you think, okay, what's the difference here going on? Because if we're comparing classical music concerts are too long, nothing happens, they're boring, well, bloody, that's cricket. But somehow they managed to make a really viable, interesting product for television. And that's because they didn't just put a camera in the front row of the stadium and leave it at that. And I feel like that's what we've gone into with broadcasting of classical music quite a lot. Whether that's harking back to the philosophy of early recording engineers, I think it was Walter Legger who came up with the concept. Might have been someone at Decca instead, but the concept of a recording wanting to replicate the best seat in the house. And I feel like we took that way too literally, because a recording is literally just sitting down and listening to the best seat in the house, and a video recording specifically. I mean, the Berliner Philharmoniker does some great streaming. They've led that for a long time, and the same with the Met Opera. But at the same time, what is the value add of broadcasting this event? And there's plenty of room basically to add, whether that's in sports, they add commentary, they add analysis, they add all these things that allow the viewer to get closer to the game, and they're specifically not replicating the live experience of being at the game. And I think all of those elements is why they've found a role closer to people, to everyday people around the world. And then on the other hand, also building a sense of fandom and sponsorship, fandom and allegiance to specific teams. And it's a funny thing reading Stefan Zweig's biography, The World of Yesterday. He talks about being a teenager in Vienna and going to the Vienna Concerthaus and the Vienna Theatre, and being absolutely obsessed and sort of proud of the Viennese playwrights and the Viennese actors and the Viennese musicians of the time. And I think we've really lost that in the pursuit of maybe greatness. I'm sure the Berliner Philharmoniker, when it was Karajan or Bruno Walter, there was probably a sense of real pride in the Berlin Orchestra from Berliners. But these days I feel I have no connection to anyone. They're a good orchestra. They have Petrenko, that's nice. I don't know any of the performers outside of friends in the orchestra. And I think there's no sort of sense of pride, even though Berlin has one of the best orchestras in the world. There's no allegiance to that orchestra from people on a daily basis, and that's because we don't know the musicians. We're not invested in their personal stories. I can tell you the personal stories of probably every football player on the Fremantle list, but couldn't tell you anything about the orchestra. And so how, on one hand, how can we develop broadcasting, even merchandising, and learning from how sport turned itself from an amateur industry into probably one of the most highest revenue turning industries in the world, and on a second level, how can we build allegiance and fandom for our ensembles and institutions, which is, again, that's similar to rock bands. People have this, especially teenagers and young adults will have obscene relationships with bands that they fall in love with, but no one's doing that in classical music anymore. So those two types of things. And I'm talking a lot. Sorry.
No, it was very interesting. I was listening with a lot of attention because it was really, really interesting. So thank you for sharing this.
I'll share one final story just on that, which I found fascinating. Which was 2 years ago. So basically, the Australian football season starts now and finishes in September. And so between September and March every year, that's cricket season in Australia, but cricket games are played between midnight and 8 a.m. in Europe. So that's not really a feasible time to watch them. And there's also no good streaming options that are legal. And knowing me, I'd definitely download the wrong apps and either get arrested or get malware infested. So I couldn't watch cricket very easily. So between September and April, I was always thinking, had this void in life that was filled, that this missing 3 or 4 hours of just engaging with sport. So I thought, all right, I need to find another sport to love. Can't be soccer. Soccer's awful. So boring. So the options I sort of looked at were baseball, American football, ice hockey, and basketball. And I think the baseball and basketball seasons sort of overlap, so that didn't help. And I ended up choosing NFL, the American football, and which I had no relationship with previously, that I thought was kind of boring. I didn't understand it. There's a lot of standing around. There's a lot of ads. I thought, all right, I'm going to get into this. And so I chose a team via the NFL website. It gave me a sort of series of questions that I could select from the, I believe, 36 teams. Should probably know that. Of which none of I'd ever heard of, and ended up choosing the Baltimore Ravens for a variety of reasons. Number one, they had purple. That's my home team color. Number two, I thought it was cool that in Baltimore they hired Marin Alsop like decades before it was cool to hire female conductors. Number three, the team's named after an Edgar Allan Poe poem. I thought that's how many professional masculine sports teams are named after like a 16-year-old goth kid's favorite poem. And number four, the best player, L. Jackson, on the Ravens, matches the best player, one of the best players on the Freo team, which is L. Jackson also. So for those reasons, I chose my team, and I purchased a subscription to the streaming platform where I could watch it. So there was a financial obligation there to watch the games now. And then I watched a few videos on YouTube to learn how the game works and started listening to podcasts. And within 3 weeks, and this is the fascinating part, I apologize, the rest of that was not fascinating, but this is the fascinating part, that within 3 weeks, I had changed from not knowing the sport at all and not really caring about it to referring to the Ravens in the royal we, as in like we won, we're playing this song. And that was fascinating. Like I called it manufactured love, that within 3 weeks, I was able to manufacture a real care, devotion, an obsession with something that I had never thought of before. So that's how quick it can happen with the right tools, with the right platforms to say, this is your team, this is the information, this is how you get into it. And yes, you probably need to be dedicated, but 3 weeks is all it takes. Yeah, and thank God the Ravens are a good team, so I don't follow another bad one.
Very good. Yeah, a lot of things to unpack here. I'm curious just about something about what is different. Like, I never watched cricket in my life. What is particular about, just very quickly, about the way they broadcast it?
Well, I mean, in the sense that it is like Test cricket. There are 3 types of cricket: 2020, one-day internationals, and Test. And so Test is almost a classical music version of cricket, and that's the original. It's steeped in tradition. There's a lot of respect to the rules. Like, they still have lunch breaks and tea breaks, and in Britain especially, it's very, very proper and sort of belongs a lot to the higher class, especially when they play at Lords. And so there's a lot of crossover there in cricket. And when you go to a game in Australia, it's really just an excuse to drink beer for 8 hours during the day for 5 days in a row. And when you go in Britain, it's the complete opposite. It's a very proper game where it's more like watching tennis. Mm-hmm. So the experience of watching it is depends on where you are, but the broadcast of it, the thing that really stands out, I think, especially in Australian cricket, was the commentary teams, and especially during the 90s and 2000s, you had this same group of commentators, and they all had really unique voices, and they were all experts on the game, and it was quite literally called the sound of summer. And so for Australians, the voices of I forget their names. Richie Benno was one, Bill Laurie, and gosh, I forget the South African fella's name. What a shame. Their voices were the sound of summer. It wasn't the game. It was the experience of turning on the telly and hearing those voices. And then, of course, you've got the replays of every action that come on. So rather than just watching each ball happen, you got to see the replays of all of them. You got to replay the decisions of the umpires, celebrate the good shots again, all these elements that you don't get in the live experience. So, that's probably the key elements.
I get it now. Yeah, it's more about the like creating the experience for it, and it's very interesting, this thing of the manufactured love and how we can bring it to classical music, because I always I have the experience also of starting music in Venezuela, being part of the orchestras of El Sistema, and for me it was very shocking coming to Europe, coming from El Sistema, and from this thing that you are saying of you're finding a team, and after such a short time being able to talk of it as we and getting completely involved into it. I'm thinking about, because I always thought, music in Venezuela has a very strong social role, but I'm thinking now for the first time of the branding of the orchestras in Venezuela that were actually quite strong, because we're seeing this huge amount of kids wearing the Venezuelan jacket, the dancing during certain musical pieces, all these things were kind of a branding thing, and I never thought of it this way. And it doesn't take that much. It's just maybe taking 1 or 2 elements that are very characteristic of something and making them very recognizable. And I see this more and more in pop music and rock music, that they take maybe a couple of colors, a couple of fonts, kind of a vibe in general, and wherever you see any of these colors or something related to this vibe, you think immediately of these people, and that makes you curious to know more and to get into it. And this is some things that are actually very easy to apply, I think, in classical music, because we all play very often dressing in black, in very similar setups, and there is nothing that is really recognizable about it. And maybe just adding one of these key elements that makes it really recognizable could help to market it way better, I think. I don't know what you think.
I think El Sistema has probably the best brand in classical music around the world, in the sense that it's recognized internationally for producing amazing musicians, that it also has a social good, and it works. And I think as an example of brand creation in classical music, that's huge. But with regards to the colouring and the design and the font, I'm thinking the Deutsche Symphony Orchestra here has a really, really bold approach to marketing. So when you see their things, their advertisements or their social media posts, it's very clear it's them straight away, whereas the Berliner Philharmoniker has its yellow and its sort of geometric shapes that it uses, and always the same font. Also, the Deutsche Oper, same thing. So I think that they think about branding in a very traditional sense, but in a very product-driven sense, I suppose. But you don't see people leaving the Philharmonic orchestras with a T-shirt afterwards or anything like that. And I think, the model of the orchestra, I mean, you can make a connection to the orchestra as the team, where the conductor is the coach. But as you say, there's nothing really defining about any orchestra these days, in that they all sound very good. They all dress exactly the same, and there's sort of no. Ironically, considering we all came through the competition industry, there becomes no sort of outright competition between orchestras vying for best Brahms orchestra in the world or best this orchestra in the world, maybe because of their need to satisfy all markets at all times. But it's an interesting thing, and I think potentially as well with the orchestral model of different conductors every night, different soloists every night, that they become interchangeable in terms of your identification with the orchestra, as opposed to, I mean, I used to think during COVID, I thought, wow, this is a fantastic opportunity, actually, for every orchestra who could start playing concerts again. What a wonderful opportunity to cancel all the international touring soloists who charge too much and produce the same product as anyone in the orchestra could do. I find it remarkable that someone would pay Janine Jansen however many tens of thousands of euros to play the Beethoven Violin Concerto, when someone in the back row of the seconds could probably do just as good a job. And that was an opportunity, I thought, that would take us back to that Stefan Zweig era, where you would go to see your orchestra, your orchestral musicians performing music, and every time you would sort of then foster a connection to that, rather than just seeing the greatest musicians night after night on a rotating stage.
Very cool. Yeah, and a question I want to ask you also, as a person that organizes events, what are some shifts that you have already made in the way you promote music and in the way you organize events in this sense or in this direction?
I'd say nothing necessarily to do with sports. There's elements of game theory, but I say that without having read enough on game theory to truly understand it. But I think we're seeing a trend now of people looking in how to gamify the concert experience, because it's a great way to interact with audience members. So we will have elements of, when we're doing a non-traditional production, of utilizing this sort of we might for some concerts create a two sets of teams that are essentially in competition with each other, though we don't say it like that, but one might have one wristband, the other has a different one, and from that a sense of community, as there's a better word for it, but tribe, that's the one. A tribe will form between the blue wristbands and the red wristbands. And then with the communication of the blues will experience something and the reds will experience something else, you can play on this tribalism developing, as well as maybe a sense of jealousy or resentment in a negative sense. So ideally not that, but maybe then this feeling, if you've done a good job, you have the feeling that the audience in the Blues think they got the best show, and the feeling the Reds, they got the best show. And from that, perhaps they want to then experience more in order to see what they missed. And so I think that's probably the closest we've gone into looking at how gaming can intersperse in the music experience. We also did a choose your own opera adventure last year at a festival where it was like the old choose your adventure books, where you'd get to a certain point in the story and then you'd have to choose one page or the next page. And in that, the audience was responsible through cheering. I was the MC, so I'd say, stop the thing now. All right, if you want the singer to do this, clap. If you want the singer to do that, cheer. And so through that, you also develop a sort of gaming element where you want to see your thing happen. So you're in competition with the others, and you're sort of more invested in the story in that sense because you're part of the thing. And I have a feeling that people, there's a shift in audience desire very rapidly over the last few years in that. It used to be fine to go to a show and sit down and witness it, and that shifted into the obsession with immersive theatre that came out of San Francisco and London, I think, where people were having to engage physically in the space a lot more, and that moved into participatory theatre where people would be part of the action, and then I think that when Black Mirror came out with the Bandersnatch film, which was Choose Your Own Adventure. I think that was in 2018, 19 perhaps. There was this desire for the audience to not only participate, but be responsible for the artistic creation. Now, we played around with that a few times, and I couldn't tell you if it was successful or unsuccessful, like more successful than simply doing a show or not, but the people seemed to respond positively. For the most part, several people I'm sure would have rather just sat back and listened to it, and we have experimented with that as well. So I think, yes, not so much from the sporting industry have I learned, but from the gamification elements, and what makes people engage deeper. And then from a marketing perspective, instead of engaging with a sporting aspect, we've been mostly looking at how popular culture and subcultures in Berlin, such as the club culture and festivals, how they communicate their tone of voice and their imagery, because we identified that our target audience is the people that are going to clubs every weekend, the people that are going to cool exhibitions, and so we're basically trying to reach those people by speaking in their language to them.
Very cool. Yeah, I think that for me, the biggest takeaway in this is that we should take the opportunity more to craft stories that people can relate to overall. Like, this is something that we can see also like in sports, like every team has a story, and we can see it also in rock bands. Every band has a story or a vibe or something that is really distinguishable or something that is really specific to that. So yeah, thank you very much for sharing this.
Pleasure.
And I will go now to the last part of the podcast, because I have a little game that I prepare for all the guests that is a bit surprise. It's very simple. It's just so people that is listening, they can get to know you in a different way. So are you ready for that?
I'm ready and excited.
Yes, so it's very simple. The first one is just a set of questions, this or that questions. So I will give you two options and you have to choose one.
Alrighty. Is this one of those psychological tests where by the end of it you can tell that I'm very perverted or something?
No, it's not.
Because the answer is yes, test. I'm very perverted. Sorry, team.
No. No test here. It's just normal answers. There is no testing of the results, so it's all good. So here we go. Books or movies?
Books.
Mountains or the sea?
Sea.
Comedy or drama?
Drama.
Cooking at home or dining out?
Cooking at home.
Analog or digital?
Analog.
And I like, very cool. And now I have 20 words here.
Mm-hmm.
And I will just say the word, and you have to say the first thing that comes to your mind.
This is the perverted bit. Excellent.
Yeah, so it's very interesting to see what comes out because this is the 5th episode I'm recording, and I'm fascinated to see how people react to it. It's all very different, so yeah. For me, it's the funniest part to see how people react to this. So yeah, here we go. So, memory.
Death.
Music.
Death.
Silence.
Death. Fucking hell. Sorry.
Color.
Blue.
Freedom.
Peace.
Love.
Huh? My wife is listening to me at the moment, so I'm glad she can't hear the other side of that.
Chaos.
Say again, sorry?
Chaos.
Oh, life.
Journey.
Life.
Home.
Fun.
Rhythm.
Don't have it.
Dream.
Confusing.
Change.
Never happening.
Voice.
Can't stand singers.
Roots.
Trees.
Fear.
Fun.
Future.
Death.
Connection.
Most important.
Art.
Questionable.
Pleasure.
Questionable.
Pain.
Unfortunate.
Failure.
Typical.
Success.
Questionable.
Great, so that was the end of it. So now we are coming to the end of the episode. Before we say goodbye, I would like to ask you, what's the best advice that you have ever received? Or if there is any advice that you would like to share with the listeners about live music or creativity?
There's probably too many to think of. It's never as good, it's never as bad as it seems. I remember there was a key moment in life where I was living in London and I was trying to get a visa to stay there. And it didn't come through in the end, and that's when I moved to Berlin. And I was in Australia at the time doing a concert that night in my hometown. And that's when I found out and made the decision that I'd move to Berlin 2 days later, flying back to London and packing everything in a day and moving to Berlin. And so I was in a bit of a down mood, and I was speaking to a friend's dad who I'd known since childhood. And I was saying, explaining the situation to him, and he said in the most delightfully Australian way, he said, well, you could cry about it, but who'd listen? And I absolutely love that sort of that approach to thing of like, and then his daughter, who's my friend, said, I was telling her about it also, and that I had to move from London to Berlin, and she just sort of scoffed, and she said, oh, life's hard, isn't it? And I thought that was a beautiful response, actually. So, yeah, those are the two things that sort of stick out, actually. So the Canine family, very, very wise and wonderful people.
Very nice. Thank you very much for joining today. I really liked having you here, and I wanted to ask you where people can learn more about your work, and if there is any projects or events in the future that you would like to share here.
Thanks very much. So the group that I founded, the 1781 Collective, here's a warning for you. Don't name your group after numbers. Numbers are really hard to remember. 1781 Collective is the group that I'm doing most of my shows in Berlin with, and we've got a large production called The Labyrinth taking place, and that's our most successful show over a period of years. This time featuring 28 artists in 12 different rooms in this large sort of dilapidated brewery that's also a recording studio. So that's our big thing to look forward to at the moment. And then Chris Lloyd, pianist, if you search that, it comes up with like 3 different Chris Lloyd pianists, so that's frustrating. But chrislloydpianist.com is mine. And then, yes, feel free to follow on all relevant social media channels, which I'm not very good at updating, except LinkedIn. I like LinkedIn. That's where we met, so it's even better.
Yeah, I like LinkedIn too. So great, I will put all the links in the description so you can just check it out in the future. I don't know when it's going to be released, but somewhere at some time in the future. And to you who are listening, thank you for joining us in this episode of María Alejandra OFF-TOPIC. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. If you want to share any comments or questions, feel free to write to me. You will find the contact form on my website. Remember that you can find more content like this on the Off-Topic blog and newsletter. Subscribe on your favorite audio platform so you don't miss the next episode. And if you want to be part of our community, visit mariaalejandrajimenez.com. Jimenez with J and with Z. Finally, if you like this episode, please share it with your favorite people and or leave us a rating on your podcast platform. This helps me a lot to keep growing and creating more episodes like this one. For support, you can also buy me a coffee. The link is in the description. And that's it for today. See you next time for more off-topic conversations. Bye!